Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got a compilation of r/traumatize them back for you all. As per usual, this is a way for you to get caught up on past videos that have been long forgotten in the catalog of content this channel uploads. So feel free to take a look, and don't forget to check out GamerSupps. Use code Oz at checkout. NW342. Guy didn't like me eating at 7-Eleven. Blunt force traumatize them back. So a few years ago, my dad was in a bad accident and ended up in the ICU. I found out halfway through my EMT job at a rescue squad, so I ended up leaving early and showing up at the hospital in my uniform. I was also halfway through a busy 24-hour shift and was exhausted. Unfortunately, we found out my dad was most likely brain dead in the ICU, and we were waiting for test results to come back. Now, I hate hospitals. I hated hospitals before I became an EMT, and I hate going to them outside of work. I hadn't eaten in like 12 hours at this point and decided to run to a 7-Eleven a few miles from the hospital, the only food close by. I was also getting a bunch of stuff for my family who was at the hospital as well. So I go to 7-Eleven, grab drinks for everyone, and decided to get cheeseburgers for myself. Yes, I am fat. Keep in mind, I'm still in my uniform and look awful. This guy is standing behind me making comments to himself that I didn't hear and didn't care about. He then goes, "Shouldn't you know better than to eat that crap? You should know better with that job." I'm exhausted, on the verge of tears thinking about my dad, and was done dealing with the BS. I go, "Well, sir, I just got done with a 14-hour shift. My dad is most likely laying dead in his fucking deathbed. I couldn't give a rat's ass what I'm putting in my body." He looked a little flustered by this, and I had already paid by this point and walked out of the store before I could see his reaction. And yes, those cheeseburgers were delicious. Faux being 7-Eleven cheeseburgers. Personally, I'm more of a 7-Eleven tornado guy myself. I've had a couple days where it's just been a long day. And sometimes I just need some caffeine, and walking by the food section and smelling all that greasy goodness, and it's just... Normally it doesn't speak to me, but oh boy. There are times where the exhaustion gets to you and that stuff sings to you, and you just gotta grab a couple, scarf them down either in the 7-Eleven or in the parking lot, or God forbid in your car, and, hope that God wasn't watching in that moment. Old-fashioned Raz. If you want to guilt trip me about not being in contact with my parents, I'm gonna tell you why I'm not. Blunt force traumatize them back. This happened many years ago when I was 20. I was working for a security company as a flex guard, meaning that I was assigned short-term to contracts and usually switched sites every few months or so. I had just started on a new site when this had happened. I was being trained on the new site, and we were right at shift change, so several people were in the back guard shack. I said that I needed to leave one time since I took the bus. The stop was a 20-minute walk away, and it was winter, so waiting an hour for the bus wasn't an option. One of the other guards asked me why I don't drive, and I explained that in addition to not having a license at the time, driving would be prohibitively expensive due to the cost of insuring a 20-year-old male driver. The other guard then asked why insurance would be so expensive, and I explained that young men cause more accidents than other groups, so our insurance rates are high. The quotes I got at the time were at least $450 a month, and I made $13 an hour. He started talking about insurance options and wouldn't really take no for an answer. I don't know if this is an American thing in general or specific to my area, but people here get weird about adults who don't drive. I was already getting irritated when he was pushing the issue. Then he asked why I don't just use my parents' insurance. For some context, I was essentially legally abandoned by my egg donor and her second husband when I was 17, about 2.5 years before this took place. This was still relatively recent at the time. I have extremely severe PTSD from what those two did to me. That means I'll need to be under the care of a psychology doctor for the rest of my life. For understandable reasons, I don't like talking about my family, especially not at work, and absolutely not with a stranger on top of that. I explained politely, but firmly, that using my parents' insurance is not and would not be an option. He kept pushing the issue anyways, asking, why not, when it's what lots of other young people do? I explained again that it just wasn't an option for me. He pushed even further, and I finally said, exasperated, I am no contact with my parents and cannot and will not be financially tied to them. Anyone with a speck of decency or common sense would know at that point to stop pushing the envelope. But not this guy. Wow, so you don't even call them at Christmas or on Mother's Day or Father's Day? That's cold. I can't even imagine doing that to my parents. He kept going along these lines and I snapped. I am not in contact with my parents because they beat me and psychologically tortured me to the point that I almost died when I was 17. And that's after they tried to kill me 3 times. So no, I don't call them on Christmas. I've never seen someone before or since shut up that hard. You could have cut the tension in that guard shack with a butter knife. It does seem that a lot of people are just blissfully unaware of the implications certain questions and answers can have. And this guy learned the hard way. I'm also really curious about the whole insurance thing because $450 a month, dude, like, were you like speeding? Did you have tickets? Did you get into accidents? Like, that is a rough insurance rate, buddy. Like, what did you do? Like, even with me having a not so clean driving record, my insurance rate wasn't even that much. And that's me being insured at 20 as well. So I am deathly curious as to what would cause a $450 a month insurance rate. That seems excessive, buddy. I think you were getting screwed. Saving Tim, Hotel Stories, Matched Energy. I used to work the overnights as a hotel night auditor. It was a small independent hotel, not part of a chain. Over the years, I've had a few fun and funny stories to share. Not all of my stories are on topic, so I'll share as much as I can as appropriate for the subreddit. It was built in the 40s by a famous architect at the time. He built the Wart in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. People flowed in and out of the hotel to see the lobby and take pictures. We had people always trying to sneak into the basement to see the bar/restaurant that had been closed and was haunted. I often got offers of cash to let people in for a few minutes, but never did it. I love my job and I didn't want to lose it. This very aggressive couple talked my coworker, Allison, into unlocking it at the end of her shift so they could sneak in on my shift. I saw them in the CCTV and flipped the breaker for the main bar so that only the flickering emergency lights came on. I heard a blood-curdling scream and heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. A very scared couple burst in the lobby, breathing hard and looking terrified. They both breathlessly claimed to have seen someone walk into the room and turn out the lights. As an additional bonus story, a woman who was upset with me for not opening the gym early started working out in my lobby. She kept staring at me, so I pretended to be doing work while browsing Reddit. After a few minutes, she said, "My husband's a police captain in Houston, and he isn't going to be happy that another man is staring at my ass." I smiled and said, "My husband is going to find it hilarious." Fucking got him. So this specific story has actually led me to discover, well, I guess rediscover, Tales from the Front Desk. So maybe one of these days I'll give that one a shot and see if you guys enjoy it. I don't know, let me know in the comments what you all think. Prudent Act 9478. Traumatized my corpo boss. Traumatized. I, female, work in a semi-corpo company and have a boss, male, who is a tad micromanaging and hates when we want to work from home. Keep in mind that there is no upside of us working in the office. I was due to have my IUD changed, made all the precautions, and told my boss I will need to work from home as I am later going for a small medical procedure. He reluctantly agreed. As the day comes, all went fine, but I was not feeling well afterwards, so I decided to take a sick day for the next day, which was Friday. I called him to tell him so, which was apparently a big mistake. He went on how it's unprofessional and that I can't just take a sick day after my home office. That it looks bad and surely I'm not feeling that bad that I can't go to work. Also went on about explaining that sick days are not for when you are hungover, clearly his assumption, or when we are just feeling a bit down. Mental problems don't exist. And that it looks weird when someone takes a sick day before or after the weekend. Only allowed to feel sick in the middle of the week, it seems. So me, being me, I got pissed and calmly explained to him that I just had a several centimeters big device ripped out of my uterus and another one pushed in via my cervix. And that, frankly, I feel like shit. The silence on his side was pretty damn long, so I said that I'll be taking the sick day because that's what they're for. To which he only mumbled something like, "Sure, take all the time you need," and hung up. To be honest, scaring guys in this day and age by the extension of female reproductive organs is one of my favorite things. Yeah, that's just a shitty boss. Here's his employee has a surgery and immediately assumes that they're hungover. Yeah, buddy, that's fucked up. I do have a really embarrassing mistake I'd like to share when I was in a corpo environment, back when I was still an intern. One of the starting projects that we had to work on was essentially like an in-house time tracking thing that also allowed employers and managers to see schedules. I fucked up. big time. And when I was developing the calendar, they gave little old intern me access to everyone's sick days and why they were taking time off. And they requested that, the calendar would be implemented. Granted, keep in mind, I was 17 at the time. I didn't know better. So when I implemented this calendar that they requested with the request that it would tell if someone has a sick day, I thought it would be cool to add the option that if you hovered over the person's sick day, it would tell you why they were sick. That was horrible. That was really, really not good. So anyone in the company had direct access to why you were taking a sick day, which was a huge mistake for me. I was 17. I didn't know any better. I was an intern, and they put me on task to deal with sensitive information regarding employees. How was I supposed to know? They approved the feature, and then 6 months later, it was operational for 6 months company-wide. They came to me and were like, hey, this needs to be changed like 6 months ago. Bit of an oopsie-whoopsie on my part. Also, related to the main story but unrelated to this, I'm also pretty sure that when you get an IUD installed, and please correct me if I'm wrong, they don't give you anesthetics for that. I might be mistaken, but that's what I've been informed of. So yeah, she had every right to take extra time off. Card Captorana. I probably said that wrong, but I'm sure you'll all correct me in the comments. A man shouldn't do the dishes. Just to add before the story, I don't know if this can be called revenge because it was done by an 8-year-old kid, but I'll go with this tag, the tag being petty revenge. So, as I stated before, this story is about my nephew and it happened when he was 8 years old. Let me tell you all about this kid because he's too damn smart. He's honest and doesn't let anyone lie, even if it's his parents. He has an amazing sense of justice too, so my family has a lot of stories about him. One of our favorites is when he came clean about gaming 5 minutes past the stipulated time when trying to kill a boss, and saying the deserved punishment of taking 5 minutes away of his gaming time the next day was too light, because he knew he did a bad thing on purpose, even though he knew it was bad. Anyways, my sister is married with a guy that comes from a pretty traditional family. Her in-laws are a bit of a pain in the ass if you ask me. They think my sister should be a stay-at-home mother and spend the whole time there in her house saying she should quit her job, one she's amazing at and the boss, FYI. They think it's terrible that my sister makes their son, her husband, do laundry, which is just putting the clothes in the laundry machine, mind you. So one time, during one of their visits, my nephew was going to wash the dishes because it was his day. Back then, he washed the dinner dishes every 5 days or so, if I'm not mistaken. And mother-in-law jumped on the opportunity to say, a man shouldn't do the dishes. And my nephew, bless his heart, answered without skipping a beat, good thing I'm not a man, I'm a boy. Mother-in-law tried to berate my sister for this, but she was so giddy about how smart her boy was that it didn't even bother her. My nephew is now 12 and his sense of justice keeps traumatizing my sister's in-laws. I love this kid. Oh no, their grandson is woke, he's doing the dishes. Like, I always have the mindset of you do you with how you want to, run your family. If you want to run a traditional family, go for it. That's your choice. But if someone chooses that they don't want to be a stay-at-home mother, don't knock them for that. That's fucked up. Not to mention, also, they're providing their child a better life by having a 2-income household, because a 1-income household, nowadays, can't afford shit. And I'm guessing the in-laws are blissfully unaware of this fact. Honestly, nephew's actions aside, that's pretty much going to constantly give the grandparents a heart attack almost every time. I feel like secondhand embarrassment for the husband in this one, because that would really suck to have your parents show up and start dictating your wife's, livelihood. Hey, quit your job. Go be a stay-at-home mother. How dare you make my son do laundry? Bro is a grown man. If he can't wash his own underwear, then we got a problem. I don't know, maybe it's just too new age and modern to just simply assume that it's healthy for a couple to share household responsibilities. I don't know, maybe that's woke, apparently. Creatrix Anima. Don't ask if you don't want to know. Don't start none, won't be none. Way back in the very early 90s, I went on a trip with the school I had recently graduated from. I guess technically it was a class, but I was just going as a graduate. I had always wanted to go to this country and the opportunity came up. It was on this trip that I was able to witness the thing of beauty that is to follow. There were not a lot of us. I think there were 6 or 7 students total, not many at all. There were 2 professors who taught the class and a married couple who basically were doing what I was doing. They'd always wanted to go to that country as well, and their association with the college allowed them to do so. So, the main characters in the story are Guy, the only student guy on our trip, hence the name, and Greta, one of the women. Greta was probably 19 and your average sorority girl, pretty popular, outgoing, and I guess she could be a bit bitchy if she needed to be. Guy was 19 and had grown up in a very religious homeschooling household, and he really just didn't know how to interact with women from outside of that culture. For example, he appointed himself the guardian of the ladies on the trip because he was the man. He was several years younger than I was, and I certainly didn't want this kid telling me where to go and when to be back. The other woman agreed with me. He was a little weird because he didn't have the same understanding of pop culture as the rest of us. But our biggest issue with him was his arrogance and well-meaning, but annoying sexism. He didn't understand women at all, and didn't respect our autonomy. At one point, we were meant to leave on the bus by a certain time, and Greta made us late. Greta had stopped at a store, and Guy didn't think that she should have. Guy took it upon himself to grill Greta about what was so important that she would disrupt all of our schedules to go to a store. Greta, as well as the rest of us, tried to be tactful here. We tried to tell him to just drop it. We tried to tell him that it wasn't any of his business. I think the professors even began to pick up what we were laying down and suggested that maybe Guy should let this one drop. Keep in mind, we're Gen X, so there are certain topics that we were less open about, and thankfully, we are today. But finally, Greta had enough of this crap. Do you really want to know why I stopped at the store? Yes. So Greta reached into her bag, smiled manically, and pulled out a box of tampons, lifting it up and displaying it as though it was the grand prize in a game show. Guy shut up at that point. This didn't need to happen, Guy. You started this shit and Greta finished it. Yeah, that guy probably remembers this for the rest of his life and is probably deeply ashamed by it. He's probably in his 50s now. God damn. I wonder if this still keeps him up at night, because goddamn, this would keep me up at night. Buddy. I feel bad because he did kind of want to be like, you know, the strong hero of the situation, but he definitely fucking overstepped just in general and was just being cringe. Like, I'm empathetic towards what he was trying to do. He was just trying to seem strong and like he was a reliable person, but buddy, 30 years ago, so my input doesn't matter, but time and place, man. I'd love to get some input in the comments on this, because this poor guy has probably spent the last 30 years just dealing with this. Good on Greta for putting him in his place. Old mud magic. Well then, he has never been really hungry. Don't start none, won't be none. My female Gen X true boomer mother and her boomer boyfriend and I were having dinner, and one of them mentioned my boyfriend not being able to join, being at work, and I said he wouldn't eat this anyway. See, there's a weird thing that boomers who are super poor still do, even if they aren't poor anymore. Remember, they were raised by the Depression-era parents who had literally nothing. I think of it like a who can suffer the most nobly exhibition that never ends. We were having boiled pork and egg noodles, seasoned with salt and pepper. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, by any means, but I know he would not eat it. So, her boyfriend says, well then he's never been really hungry. As if ever having been truly hungry means you will and must always eat any and everything ever offered. Because what if you're ever hungry again? Like I said, it's weird. Anyway, the traumatize them back part. I said, well, he's told me he remembers eating the paint chips off the wall as a kid because he was so hungry, so I don't know about that. Both of their faces just fell from proud smugness that had been plastered on them a moment before. They didn't say anything else about it. Ah yes, the suffering Olympics. I find this to be just wild because I've always heard the saying of like, oh, we want our kids to live better lives than we did. And then when you dare do, you're the devil and they gotta hit you with the, you don't know how good you had it. Back in my day, we had to make a hobo stew. You kids these days not knowing how difficult it is to tenderize a whole hobo. I don't know, the whole one-upping thing when their whole goal in life was to make life easier for their descendants seems just wild to me. Not to mention they've made things worse, but hey, at least their stock portfolios are doing good. Ain't much to do. Sir, I worked in a pediatric trauma unit. Petty revenge. There's a 4-lane US highway near my house that I take anywhere I need to go. Work, grocery store, kids to school, etc. After over a decade of living in my neighborhood and driving it every day, I've gotten pretty adept at knowing the vibe and flow of the road, when the lights turn, what traffic ahead will do, etc, etc. So, I'll wax and wane from 50 to 60 miles per hour. The speed limit is 55. Coast down hills to hyper mild to red lights. And I generally stay in the right lane doing this, unless I have to make a left turn or in situations I'll describe ahead. This has enabled me to, several times a month, play one of my favorite games, arrive at red lights at the same time, or even end up ahead of, in a line at the light, people who theatrically careen past me. Someone whips around me at 75 miles, it's always hilarious to either cruise normally or casually change lanes when I'm clear and end up 3 cars ahead of them at the red light they just accelerated to. One day, almost immediately after I turned onto the highway, I was very dramatically and theatrically passed by a boomer in an SUV adorned with a few prominent bumper stickers. "One big ass mistake, America. The SEALs ended one threat to America and the other in November." And other lovely items in that vein. And I knew, based on the timing of the red light ahead of me, I just might have the most incredible luck and timing. For whatever reason, the moon and the stars aligned that day because 4 times in a row, I was able to casually pass him or end up directly next to him at a red light, 15 to 20 seconds after they'd arrived there. Now, for the bit to be complete, I have to make sure I don't change a single thing about how I drive normally, and to completely ignore the other driver. I've lost out on doing this a number of times because of that, but reacting to them totally invalidates the exercise. Still, after 4 times of meeting / being ahead of him, I admit my latent pettiness began to shine through, and that's what set him off. Watching me coast directly through a newly turned green light as he was just accelerating hard off the block. I zipped past him at 45 to 50 miles an hour because I knew the light cycle timing and I'd seen the cross streets were clear. And then I committed what was perhaps an even more egregious sin than being in front even though I drove slower. I smiled and waved to the guy as I went by. To add insult to injury, he got held up by traffic in front of him, so he changed lanes abruptly and pulled up behind me with an obvious lead foot. I'm sure the Germans have some kind of word for how I felt that day. And man, I felt it big time. Unfortunately for me, the driver felt it necessary to escalate his drama from not being in front when I drove faster by changing lanes to cut off another car and then waiting for me to pull up next to him at the following red light, leaving 50 to 60 feet of space in front of his car to do so. He rolled down his passenger side window and angrily gestured at me to roll down mine. When I obliged, he rattled off a series of expletives, suggested my driving skills were more in line with an elderly woman's, and so on and so forth. I gave him a second, just smiling. I'm an ER nurse by trade, and so his diatribe isn't anything that would be out of place in a mundane overnight shift. And then I interrupted him by saying, "Sir," loudly and repeatedly until he got out of breath enough for me to interject. "Sir, I worked in a pediatric intensive care trauma unit. Ever seen what happens to a 7-year-old when paramedics have to yank him out of a car with the jaws of life?" I gave him a short, 2-sentence, very graphic description of a case I'd seen that I occasionally still have nightmares about. After I saw that, I decided to drive more carefully. It took him a few seconds for him to comprehend what I said, as I think he was expecting me to join him in cursing or hollering. Then he paused for a moment, looked away from me, rolled up his window, idled the next 50 to 60 feet up to stop where he normally would have been if he didn't need to throw a temper tantrum, and then drove off at a fairly normal pace when the light turned green. Yeah, when I was like 16 or 17, I did this, and I've learned my lesson since then. I mean, thankfully I didn't get into an accident or cause any problems. I was just kind of a goober, and, yeah, the dirty looks you get ain't worth it, let me tell you what. At most, if you're lucky, you might shave off maybe 1 or 2 minutes off of like a, 20-minute drive. But in the end, it's not really going to do much for you. And you're just going to be seen as an asshole, and God forbid you piss off someone with a temper. That can be deadly. As someone who used to drive like a goober hooligan, trust me, it's not worth it. I find it embarrassing, though, that they're old in doing this, because normally most people, they get out of this phase when they turn around, 19 or 20. I know I did. And for those of you who are kind of young and figuring out driving, and you might feel you're invincible, you fully know your car, you got it all handled, take this from someone who has quite literally a checkered past with driving. All it takes is one patch of loose asphalt, and your night's over. I've unfortunately seen it happen. You can be the best, most confident driver who understands every minute detail of their car, but nothing changes the road conditions and the unpredictability of it. You gotta drive carefully. Save it for the track. Abbreviations: any. 9235. Hypocrisy from parents. Matched energy. I have a story to share that happened on the 4th of July. I apologize in advance, I'm on mobile. My fiance, 24 female, and I, 26 male, moved from Michigan to South Carolina 3 years ago, and we just bought our first home last year. Both of our families are from the same area in Michigan and all visit every few months. Different groups like siblings, then parents, and so on. And we visit back there as well. Well, my dad and stepmom, 55 and 50, are visiting now for a whole week for the 4th at our house. Important to note that they are entitled parents, even though we are long off the teat of needing any of their help or guidance running a household. We have 2 dogs, a Great Pyrenees and a Red Heeler, that we do not feed off of our plates or allow them to beg. I had to correct and ended up yelling at them 7 times on the 4th to stop feeding my dogs burgers, beer, yeah, what the fuck, and pasta salad. They both cackle and say, well, their grandparents can give them whatever they want. I respond, you absolutely cannot give them any more food and no beer at all. My stepmom says, yes, we can, we spoil our granddogs. They get bored with eating dog food you give them. Mind you, their food has tons of supplements. So, to get my point across, I say, okay, well, I'm going to make a phone call to my brother who is house/dog sitting for them and tell him to just feed your dog whenever or not at all, or just whatever he feels like. She was appalled and tells my dad how fucked up of me to say, which I reply, see, it's not so fun anymore, is it? Do not feed another morsel to my fucking dogs. My house, my rules, remember? She went inside and went to bed at 6 p.m. because of this, pouting that I'm an asshole. Why are some parents so matter-of-fact that they are untouchable, even to their grown kids? This is aggravating on so many levels because just for like basic starters, you don't know what's in the food in its entirety, what kind of additives, ingredients, or other things that could be put into the food that is toxic or harmful to dogs. This is definitely really bad for them and can cause a lot of problems down the line that are health related. Not to mention, depending on the dog, and if they're a bit of a bastard, this could cause them to go on a hunger strike where they don't eat their dry food because they're now expecting macaroni salad and beer. If you want to treat your dog to good food, get them quality dog food that is made for dogs. Don't give them people food. People food can really fuck them up down the line. It also creates problems of begging down the line, and especially if they're older dogs, you kind of set a precedent of, oh, this is the new norm, and it can be really difficult to break that habit. I think the most that I've ever justified giving to a dog is little slices of cheese and whipped cream. And even then, that is like a once a month thing because of all the sugar in it. And I make sure that, hey, you gotta brush their teeth right after because you don't want them to get cavities or other problems with their teeth because of the added sugars. And the unfortunate sad part is yes, it would make them very happy in that moment to have people food. And they would be over the moon about it. But you're potentially sacrificing months or even years off of their lifespan by giving them constant amounts of people food. Now, I grew up with a lot of dogs. I currently do not have a dog, but I'm very familiar with the fact that some dogs, when they get introduced to people food, they'll go on hunger strikes, and they could go days without eating because they're expecting a new higher quality standard of food. And unfortunately for some people, it gets to a point where I just want to get something in my dog's stomach, and they cave. More people food. And that can lead to a long-term set of health issues that are going to creep up on you down the line. Well, yeah, your dog having one burger once isn't going to suddenly give them a bunch of health issues, but it's not good for them. Because hell, even in that one moment, who knows what kind of digestive issues they're going to have? Are they going to be painting the walls brown because their stomach isn't adapted to having the high amounts of sodium and fat in a human burger? Who knows? And this isn't even me touching upon the backwards logic of the fact that when it comes to their dogs, they have stricter standards, but when it's their kids' dogs, oh, they want to be the favorites, and therefore they get to essentially give them whatever the hell they want. That doesn't fly. Beautiful Phantom 1 shut down the guy that had been trying to prove he was better than me for months, with some unintended help. Don't start none, won't be none. The company I worked for had moved from one mine to another. Half the employees had moved to the new town to continue working for the same company at the same pay, with the added per diem incentive. Of course, since only half of us would relocate, the company had to hire some new people. One guy was a thorn in my side from the moment he started. Let's call him Cory. Cory thought that because I was female, I couldn't possibly run a haul truck as well as he did. His biggest mistake was in constantly trying to call me out on the radio. He'd do things like telling me I could make a 3-point turn at this point, that point, and another, to get into a tight spot when the loader was at the same spots. I wouldn't say a word and get into perfect position with a 1-point turn, which amazed trainees, amused the operators that relocated, and angered Cory. He'd constantly try to tell me that I had to yield to the light-duty trucks, regular pickups. Light duties actually had to yield to us unless we had a stop or yield sign. There were more, but I think I've painted his picture. I was pretty good about not responding and just continued on with my day. Our boss would occasionally ask me why Cory had said such and such on the radio to me and ask why I hadn't responded. I'd explained what was really going on, that if I had responded, I would have proven him wrong in front of the whole mine, and I would have done it in such a sarcastic manner that it would have not looked good to the company we were subcontracting for. Boss knew me from the other mine, so he knew I was damn good at my job and sarcastic as hell. He started getting on the radio to tell Cory to worry about driving his own truck and leave me to operate mine. Cory, of course, didn't take the boss's words to heart. He was bound and determined to prove that he was somehow better or more knowledgeable than me. But one day, I had just had enough. Our company used red and amber lights on top of the loader to indicate if the loader was in production mode and ready for trucks, or was just cleaning the floor without worrying about having to look at what the trucks were doing. I pulled up about 100 feet from the loader and parked because his red light was on. And that was the company policy. Cory pulled up behind me with the trainee in his buddy seat. I hear the radio key up and Cory says, "You know, you can wait closer to that loader." I keyed up my radio and said, sternly, granted, but amazingly without my usual sarcasm, "According to that red light, I can't be within 100 feet of that loader." As I was told later by his trainee, the trainee starts flipping through his new haul truck handbook, shows him the red light rule and says, "She's right." The loader operator stopped cleaning his floor for a second, keyed up his radio and said while laughing, "Cory, if you'd just start listening, you'd learn a lot from her." That was the last time Cory ever tried to call me out. This is definitely probably born from sexism and also just kind of an inferiority complex where he's afraid of looking inferior because a woman is doing it better than him. It is nice though that it's only one asshole at the company that has a problem with it and everyone else seems fairly supportive. If you do the job good, no one really cares, except for Cory apparently. Puzzle-headed Art 3325. Make construction noise over allowed hours and steal my electricity without asking? Thank you for my new extension cords. So there's a new house construction in the lot next to mine. Moving into a new development 2 years ago, I knew I'd have construction around me sooner than later. As expected, there's a new house getting built in the lot next to mine. Bit of a bummer for me seeing construction starting on my first day of vacation, but what can you do? Noise hours in my town are from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during weekdays and 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, and no construction and or industrial noises on Sunday. Despite this, they work 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. The town's doing nothing because the sole inspector is on vacation. Police don't care, anyway. We're the type of town where police response is measured in days. Neighbors have lodged official complaints. I tried talking with the builders, but to no avail. Thursday, I walked outside to see them using my exterior outlets for their air compressor and other tools. I had a talk with them and the general contract was rude as fuck. Eventually apologized and told me it wouldn't happen again. Yesterday, I came home late in the evening after being out all day to see multiple extension cords plugged into all of my exterior outlets. The builders had already left, but the cords remained. I turned off the breakers, I should have thought about it sooner to be honest, and took the extension cords to my parents' place. 5 very nice, 100-foot exterior grade 12-gauge cords. Dad kept 2, my brother took 2 home today, and the last one I'm giving it to a friend who could use a better one. This morning, at 6 a.m., the builders came knocking for their cords. "I don't know, bro, I haven't seen them. Anyway, you're not supposed to use my power. Didn't the general contractor tell you? Cue whining and complaining. Front door neighbor came in clutch and started berating them for bothering me and leaving their tools outside. Are they stupid or what? Don't they know we have copper thieves around here? So they waited until 9 a.m. until the town's only hardware store opened and bought new extension cords. For what? I don't know, because my breakers are still turned off and will remain so as long as construction is ongoing. They came back with new cords, but no power from my house. So they left, having nothing to do. Today, I spent my time installing new security cameras around the house, just in case. Anyway, been meaning to do it as we do have serious theft issues around here. I would have loved to see the reaction of them plugging in and finding no power after, the breakers had been turned off. Because what are they gonna do? Knock on the door and be like, hey, could you please turn your power back on so we could use our tools on your outlets for free? Thanks. But instead, they went home because they couldn't do any work. But why would... I'm so confused as to why they didn't just bring like a battery set or some kind of way to be able to perform work without tapping into like the neighbor's electricity. What if they were building the first house in the lot and there was no electricity to steal from? What were they gonna do then? They kind of got in the habit of relying off of him for his power and, well, lost the extension cords. Didn't you know there's copper thieves in the area? But in all seriousness, this is what HOAs are supposed to be for, is to prevent shit like this from happening. This is what HOAs are supposed to do, not harass neighbors for bullshit reasons because hee hee ha ha, your lawn gnomes don't have the right hat color. Instead, the HOA is supposed to serve you, the homeowner, which is why you pay HOA fees because they're supposed to do stuff that's supposed to help you out. I'm guessing this neighborhood probably doesn't have a proper HOA in order, which is why he couldn't go to them, but this is what an HOA is for. And it sucks that so many HOAs now have people in the seats where their entire life is based around making other people miserable. Also, OP, I got a recommendation for you. Check your driveway for nails. Seriously. Felicia Dickaso. I have no idea if I said that right, and oh boy. So, why would you do that to my wife? Matched energy. So a few years ago, my hubby, 39 male, and I, 45 female, went bar hopping in our town. We ended up at a small bar and ran into one of my husband's brother's friends. We were all in the back patio area, standing around and talking to the group. We did introductions because it was my first time meeting everyone. At this point, everyone knew I was married, etc. While we were talking, my husband was standing across from me and we were still talking to the group in sort of a circle, when all of a sudden, I felt hands on my back, giving me a back rub. Full on squeeze the shoulders back rub. I kind of froze, but gave my husband bug eyes, trying to tactfully tell him something was wrong. He gave me a funny look because he wasn't quite sure what was wrong. Then the guy stopped rubbing my shoulders and walked away. My husband walked over to me and asked what was wrong. I told him exactly what happened. He responded, well, let me go do that to him. So he walked up behind the guy who was about 10 feet away from me, with his back to us, and my hubby started rubbing his back. And asked him, this is kind of weird, isn't it? The guy said, yeah. And hubby said, I bet you don't like it, huh? The guy responded, no. Then my husband yelled, then why the fuck would you do that to my wife? I think the guy was so drunk he didn't even realize whose back he was rubbing. Not an excuse. He acted completely shocked and scared. After a bit of verbal scuffle with the group, the guy was sent home by security and they asked us to leave out the front. This reaction by my husband was the best though. He could have punched him, but this was so much better. I still laugh about it to this day. Honestly, this is probably the perfect way to deal with this. No violence, just uncomfortable, and the guy was probably drunk and just out of his mind, and this is definitely the way to deal with it, because chances are the adrenaline will make him remember this. I do wonder what this scuffle that they mentioned would entail, because it had to have been something for all parties to be removed from the bar, but I don't know. This one's posted by Wasabi, but spelled with a 4, a 1, and an underscore. No Christmas presents? Well, let me embarrass you in front of everyone. Now everyone knows. It's a fun little story of when I was a child. My father always was neglecting and thought about his kids, including me, as trophies, but never bothered taking care of them, even if he was a teacher and, therefore, pretty loaded with money. That he spends for himself, of course. Okay, just like quick context because I had to look at this because already in America that is certainly not the case. He's not a teacher, he's a professor, and they're in France, so it's a bit of a different circumstance. It was Christmas and he invited a bunch of family members. Us kids, my little brother and my 2 stepsisters, were excited, obviously since it's Christmas. But once midnight came, everyone but my brother and I got presents. Not because we were naughty kids, but because our father didn't bother buying something. We ended up talking about it to a family member and that person told our father. Of course, my dad started yelling at me. I'm the oldest sibling. And then he said, "It's because you didn't give me anything for my birthday." In my 9-year-old child mind, something tickled. My father is born in December, and I'm born in November, by the way. I said in an innocent voice in front of everyone, "But Dad, you didn't give me any presents for my birthday either. You didn't even wish me a happy birthday." Which is true, by the way, but I never really liked my dad, so I never really cared. He was so embarrassed that every family member, even distant ones, gotta hear that he didn't even remember his own child's birthday. Still today, my stepmother still remembers that story, and I'm very proud of my childhood self for responding like that. Who the hell looks at their 9-year-old child and is like, "You didn't get me anything for my birthday, so I'm not getting you Christmas presents"? Like, I'm not crazy, and that's really weird, right? That a father is, like, expecting, like, his children to get him, like, a birthday present? I mean, I don't know what a 9-year-old can get him besides, like, a handmade craft, and even in that case, is that really something you're gonna take away both their birthday presents and their Christmas presents for? Originally, I thought, hey, maybe it's because he's on a teacher's salary, so he's not able to get Christmas presents for them, but him ranting and raving with the fact that, he didn't give them presents because he didn't get anything for his birthday, and the fact that they're not American, he's a professor in a French university. I don't know, man. Honestly, my main takeaway from this is it turns out that teachers who teach in other countries are actually paid a fair wage and not pretty much sentenced to economic poverty. Silver Syndicate. I'd like to personally introduce you to the man you married. Nuclear revenge. Buddy of mine said I should share my story of what happened before I went no contact with my father, stepmother, and the entire father's side of my family, including siblings. So I figured, why not? I will say this fits under multiple tags, but nuclear revenge is extremely fitting. My genetic father was an abuser from hell. I always called him the Disney dad stereotype because he portrayed himself as this amazing person out in public, and then would turn into a monster the moment we were behind closed doors. Every once in a while, he'd show his true colors by demeaning my mother around family or laying his hands on me in public. However, all throughout my childhood and during the hellscape of a divorce, nobody believed what happened to my mother and I because nobody ever saw it. It also doesn't help that he was a master narcissist and knew how to manipulate the system. If you lived with him, there was a very strict line that you had to follow. Otherwise, you were accosted, threatened, tracked, made to live in absolute fear because he would not only hurt you, but he would make others believe that you were crazy to drive them away, leaving you with no one to turn to, sometimes by making them afraid of you, and if they were kids, he'd make them fear him, and then acted confused when the children didn't come around anymore. I can't tell you how many times he would purposely scream in front of my friends to drive them out of the house, or tell lies to family about my mother and I so they either wouldn't talk to us or judge us for things that never happened. I remember that if I cried, I was a dramatic child. If I got angry, I was a manipulative little bitch with anger issues. We could never be right, and were never allowed to speak about what happened to us. If it wasn't the perfect family with a white picket fence, it wasn't good enough for him, and he would correct it. Apologies to cut this off here, but mild content warning ahead for sexual assault and sexual violence. He even threatened to force himself on my mother and would watch me undress through a cutout in my bedroom door. In addition, he was cheating on my mother with at least 5 different women. Sometimes I wish he would just beat the hell out of me or me. Just something. Anything that I could use as proof to get his ass busted for abuse and neglect. However, although he assaulted us in many ways, he never left marks, so there was never anything to show or prove. Even in court, I wasn't given a voice because my father had lied and said that my mother had been alienating me against him. Even though I was the one in heavy therapy for the abuse, I was denied literally everything on the grounds of alienation alone. The system failed me at every turn. During the divorce, my father was constantly tracking my mother and I, physically or over social media. It didn't matter. Then, after I'd finally thought it was over, as the first case was settled and I was living with my mother, I opened up to a friend on Facebook about what happened for the very first time. And my father used that conversation to bring my mother back to court. He would do things to hurt me knowing it hurt my mother, and would rack up court and group therapy costs to leave my mother and I literally surviving off of canned food in thrift stores because every family member believed that we were the bad guys thanks to my father's lies. Even my own brother took his side and abandoned me. While my mother and I fought for scraps, he was living in a large home, remarried to a sugar mommy in less than a year, and only offering me help if I promised to spend time with him. For 18 years, I was quiet and played his game. However, if he taught me anything in my life, it was how to stalk and gather information. If I couldn't have a voice as a child, I sure as hell was going to start screaming as an adult. The one good thing about the divorce was the therapy, because they suggested that both my father and I write down everything that had stuck with us throughout our lives and who affected them. Because of this, I got a much more disturbing look into my father's life. I found his diary at one point and stole it. Along with that, I also took the book of his contacts he kept for the people he cheated on his spouses with, and broke into my mother's safe to find all the divorce documents. I'd also found documents regarding him lying about his degree to get his then current job. I held that information and only added to it for years. The few of many things I learned from all this private information was A. My father had fantasies. B. My father had incestuous feelings towards his mother, my grandmother. C. He'd forged documentation to prevent me from getting an attorney during the divorce. D. He was now cheating on my stepmother. E. He lied to CPS multiple times. F. He applied for several credit cards and half of them were maxed out. He did this before the divorce was final and was trying to commit fraud by putting the debt in both his and my mother's name. G. No one in my family knew the truth about him, and my stepmother married him believing it was actually my genetic mother who was cheating. Just more lies. By the time I was 18, I had gathered about 200 pages worth of deplorable behavior, including my own personal audio recordings of the abuse. Along with this, I also had all the contacts of every single family member who turned their backs on my mother and I, along with his boss's contact information. So, what did I do when I became an adult and was no longer legally gagged and forced to be around my father? I put everything into a file and sent a mass group text. You all claim to not know what happened, but you never asked. If you would have just listened for 1 second, you would have known the extent of the abuse inflicted upon myself and my mother. You all turned your backs on a starving, abused, neglected child while holding the hand of the man who caused it. You all ignored the pleas of a single mother escaping from an abusive relationship, and instead listened to the lies of the abuser. You're still doing it, so I'm going to show you all what happened from my side for a change, and after that, I pray to never see your faces again. Families are supposed to be there to love and support. You're not my family. You're just a group of people I gave too much credit to. And to you, my stepmother, the woman who sat in court against my mom while never even bothering to sit at a table for dinner with your own stepchild, I'd like to personally introduce you to the man you married. After that, I sent a mass email to everyone, including his boss, the documents of him lying for his job application, then deleted and blocked every single contact after I was sure they received it. Unfortunately, I don't have some grand conclusion to this because I never knew their response, and honestly, didn't care to. I'm doing well now, and have a stepfather who treats my mother right, so overall, we're okay. Took a lot of years of self-improvement, but I'm still moving forward. I was quiet for years, and all I can hope is that when I finally was able to speak up, that I caused enough chaos to put a dent in my genetic father's perfect life. All I wanted was to tell the truth, and in the end, that's all I really did. But it felt amazing to get everything off my chest and have the ability to put that chapter behind me for good. This one hit a bit too close to home, not because I had parents who fell into this category, but if you're familiar with my past, yeah, this kind of shit is almost impossible to escape without destroying your own life in the process, and I'm happy they were able to escape it, and I'm firmly on my way to attempting to escape my own, and oh my god. This one was a bit rough, and Ugh. And unfortunately for me, I was on both sides of the coin. I was both a person who was wrapped in the web and actively perpetrating the pain, while also eventually becoming one of the people who were being snipped out of it and controlled, and watched the very web that I was once a part of turn against me. And thankfully, a lot of the people who I did hurt while being a part of that web accepted my apology, and a lot of us have moved forward in life, and we have once again become close friends, and I'm going to be forever thankful for that. And as for this story, I can only hope the father rots, honestly. World-renowned hussy. Why won't you just have a drink? I discovered this sub today and started grinning maniacally. This is my favorite pastime. My sister died of alcoholism when I was 20 and in college. I'm 22 now. I never really liked alcohol very much in general. The intoxicated feeling makes me feel strange. Usually they don't taste good, they never do, and sometimes drinks can make my stomach upset. I still have a fruity something or other on a rare occasion. People are so goddamn pushy about drinking though. I'm sure you know what I mean if you don't drink. People would be like, you're in college, what do you mean you don't want to drink? You're 21! What do you mean you don't want to go bar hopping? Always trying to shove drinks down my throat. Always trying to get me to just try something. It's incredibly irritating. If someone offers me something I don't want, I'll answer with, I don't like drinking very much, at their first, why? If they push though, I love busting out the dead sister card. Oh, come on, why don't you want to drink? Oh, well, my sister died of alcoholism. I watched her pass away from internal bleeding and organ failure in the hospital. After that, drinking just makes me uncomfortable. Oh, the faces people make to that are spectacular. I'm aware this makes me an asshole, by the way. Nah, you're good. This is an effective way to deal with peer pressure. Not everyone likes to drink. I'll have a drink occasionally, but it's pretty damn rare if I'm gonna be honest with you, because they never taste good unless it's filled to the brim with sugar. And honestly, I really only enjoy drinking in social situations, which is very rare if I'm gonna be honest. But if someone keeps pushing you after you say no to having a drink and they're continuing to try to get you to try something, your response is entirely valid. You said no originally, and they continue to push. Now they get to find out what no really means, and they have to deal with that. Bad Club 3. Sorry my mom's death is inconvenient. My mom recently passed away in a car accident. How recently? Well, I went out to the cemetery today and removed some additional flowers from her casket spray to dry for a shadow box I'm creating. And while the flowers are wilted, they're in great shape. As her only child and next of kin, I'm trying to balance my life along with all the freaking paperwork that comes along with someone dying unexpectedly. This situation involves the vehicle claim portion of her car insurance. The person handling the medical side has been wonderful, but the one handling the actual vehicle, not so much. For background, I've worked fast food, retail, and in a call center. I've been yelled at, spit on, threatened, etc. So it honestly takes a lot for me to get frustrated and lose my temper with a customer service rep because I've been there. In fact, the person at the insurance company that I reported the incident to had never done intake on a claim with a deceased person where she was speaking with the next of kin. She was awkward, but did a good job of remaining empathetic, but probably asked the same question a few too many times, lol. Yesterday, I called the vehicle claim person to alert them that the other vehicle's owner had hired a lawyer and I was going to be sending them a copy of the docs. During our conversation, the rep stated multiple times how frustrating it was that it would take several weeks to obtain prior medical records and that the title to the vehicle was in my deceased stepfather's name, and that they needed to talk with his next of kin. I finally snapped, explaining I had no idea where my stepsister was, and yes, it was incredibly inconvenient my mother didn't change the title to herself, but damn, I would love to ask my mother what she was thinking. But given that she plowed into a semi, her vehicle burst into flames and the body was in such a horrid shape they couldn't do any pathology, nor was I able to kiss my mom goodbye one last time since my friend who runs the funeral home absolutely refused to allow me to see her remains due to, the fire. I didn't think my mom was going to be able to explain her way of thinking, so sorry her tragic death is making your job more difficult. I hung up the phone, emailed the medical claim person about my frustration with the vehicle claim person. An hour later, I received a call from a supervisor who apologized for the lack of care I received and they would be handling my case. Trust me, I'm frustrated with my mom too, but not like we can do anything other than work with what we got. Well, first things first, I'm incredibly sorry for your loss. It's gotta be terrible. I'm lucky enough to still have both of my parents alive, so I've yet to deal with that level of grief, and I don't know how I'll personally handle it, but it's something that I worry about almost on the daily. Props to you for handling it with as much grace as you were able to until, well, eventually and reasonably snapping. I mean, I don't think I could handle it with that much grace. Any kind of resistance I would receive when trying to arrange my parents', well, estate preparations, I would say. I'd probably just snap in that moment. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I understand there's definitely gonna be a lot of red tape attached to that, but at the same time, God. How many lines can you realistically cross in a situation like this before you're at risk for losing your job? I definitely feel like with how complicated the matter is, with the stepfather being involved, the mother being the primary person who owned the vehicle, took care of it, took it for maintenance, probably made payments on it, I do wonder if it would be reasonable to assess the vehicle was in sole possession of the mother and therefore her property, with her husband being deceased and the title not being transferred over. I don't know. This does seem like a very complicated situation, and I'd be curious to anyone who's more familiar with this, what the realistic outcome would be and what the realistic requests you could make would be. Mesito. Supply teacher is homophobic during class, so the class triggers her. Petty revenge. This happened around 5 or 6 years ago when I was around 13, so some details are a bit fuzzy. I was in class, can't remember what class it was, and our regular teacher was ill, so we had a supply teacher. A substitute would be my guess for those of us who are Americans. There was a group of about 5 of us sitting together that were LGBT+. One of them had a pride flag drawn on her hand. The supply teacher saw this and confronted her. The conversation went as followed. Supply. What's that on your hand? A pride flag. You shouldn't be drawing that on your hand. I'm Muslim, and being gay is against my religion. And I'm not religious. Your beliefs don't affect me. At this point, the supply went on a tirade of homophobia, and said things like, why are kids these days so Islamophobic? Even though our regular teacher, who was fine with LGBT+, was also Muslim. At some point, another member of the group started drawing the pride flag on his hand, just to see if he could trigger the supply even more. The rest of the group caught on, and we all started drawing various pride flags on our hands and arms. The supply caught us, and once again started her tirade of homophobia and how disrespectful we were to Muslims. She even said that drawing pride flags on ourselves in the presence of a Muslim was a religious hate crime. She didn't like it when I said, by your logic, wearing religious clothing is a gay hate crime since many religions are anti-LGBT+. She responded saying, my hijab is just how I express myself. She didn't know what to say when someone else said, and drawing pride flags is how they express themselves. This confrontation let the rest of the class in on our little scheme, and they too started to draw pride flags on their hands and arms. Even the homophobic kids were doing it. They weren't being supportive, they just liked pissing off teachers. One kid even told the supply, doesn't every religion say don't be a dick? How are you gonna preach about your beliefs and you can't even follow a simple rule like that? After the class, a bunch of us went to complain about the supply to our head of year. I don't know what happened to her, but we had a different supply for the rest of the week. I like to think that our class collaboration has dissuaded her from going on other homophobic tirades. Edit, please don't use this post to spread hate about Muslims and other religious people. This supply teacher does not represent all Muslims. As I said earlier in the post, my regular teacher was also Muslim, and she had no issue with LGBT. The majority of religious people keep to themselves and don't force their perspectives onto others. There's just a vocal few that make religious people seem bad. I appreciate the disclaimer, and I'm going to state the usual that I don't care what religion or sexual orientation or the hell you follow or fall into. I will bad for you as long as you bad for me. That's all I ask. If we can agree on that, then we're chill. There are a few exceptions, but those ones are pretty obvious, like files and knives. But that's besides the point. This actually did remind me of my senior year in high school where we had a new electronics teacher who was in the building. Granted, I never really interacted with him besides the fact that I was able to fool him into allowing me to take home very expensive equipment that his school would have never greenlit ever. It's also because of that I was able to modify my first car's ECU. So, thanks. But that aside, this teacher was extremely homophobic. And to put it in perspective, in my graduating class of 30 people, I'm not kidding, I would say that half of us were some form of LGBTQ+, in some way or another. To put it in perspective, when a straight couple kissed, he was fine with that. but a gay couple showed any kind of affection of kissing or holding hands, they were sent to the counselor's office or principal's office. He graded LGBTQ people on a very aggressive curve, while the people who were outwardly straight did not receive that aggressive curve. I know kids that failed his class because they were just simply gay. And like, by all means, these kids weren't slackers in school. They competed in a little thing called, if you're familiar with this, Skills USA, and won, in some categories, nationals. They were extremely talented. And despite this, they miraculously failed. Granted, a failing grade in my school was anything below a 70. However, when the school's pride and joy national championships of Skills USA end up getting a spotlight on them because they failed a class, a lot of questions get asked, and especially when known slackers and delinquents manage to pass while those who were exceptional students and 4.0 students previously suddenly failed, a lot of questions got raised. And when it was found out about his history of homophobia, he wasn't an instructor the next year. Xandar337. Got called fat at grandma's funeral. Matched energy. I, 37 male, flew home for grandma's funeral this past weekend. She and I were very close. I have PTSD and it affects my memory, so a lot of the people I met at her funeral I had already met and forgotten about. My dad has a ton of cousins, and one of them came up to meet me at the front of the chapel. I've met him before, but it's been many years and I really don't remember him. We shook hands and traded names, and he said, "The last time we met, you were much slimmer." Before I could even think about what to say, my mouth opened and I loudly blurted out, "Oh man, you wouldn't have to tell me I'm fat. I got a mirror and I have to look at his big old belly every single day." I rubbed my belly and poked it out to make it look bigger, like I was pregnant. He immediately ran off and didn't come back. I told my immediate family of the story and they laughed and said he was an asshole pretty much all the time. So he had it coming. I feel like Grandma would have been proud that I gave him a taste of his own medicine. Personally, I think self-deprecating humor works the best when it's in response to something and not just out of nowhere, which I'm guilty of this. I use self-deprecating humor all the time, but I feel like it has the best effect when you're using it to shut someone down. See, I got so used to using self-deprecating humor as kind of like a defense mechanism in middle school and high school that it got to a point where I would like preemptively insult myself to prevent anything from being thrown my way. And I feel like that's how a lot of people use self-deprecating humor, or have gotten into the habit of using self-deprecating humor. But if I could throw out a suggestion, self-deprecating humor is out. Only if it's in self-defense, then it's fine. But overly confident humor is 100% in. Getting into a fight with a Ford F-150? Nah, I'd win. You versus a horse with a gun? I could probably take him if I had some prep time. And as long as it's in a KFC parking lot. But like, you can't use this in a cocky matter, it has to come off as clearly joking. Self-deprecating when you're insulted, cocky in general. Avoid self-deprecating out of nowhere. It can definitely make people a little uncomfortable. I don't know, but I'd love to get some audience input on this general concept. Posted by a deleted account. Nosy teenagers after closing. Petty revenge. So I used to work as a cashier when I was a teenager at a little mom and pop shop that was close to my house. We closed at 7 in the evening, but everyone always conveniently needs something at 6:55. Anyway, one night when I was working the closing shift, a few people came in and out near closing to get a few things, which I was fine with since they knew what they needed and where it was. But there was this group of 4 teenagers, 17 to 18, who were moseying around the shop after 7, and since only the assistant manager was there besides me and some packagers in the back of the store, neither of us had the authority to kick them out without getting in trouble. Eventually, they came over to my register with about 20 items, and I scanned and bagged them as quickly as possible because I'm super hungry, want to go home, and still had to count my drawer. They kept commenting on my style and hair choice. I was wearing my work shirt with a comfy orange and black jacket, and my bangs were a little oily since I hadn't washed my hair in a few days, and my customer service attitude was quickly depleting. Eventually, one of them says in a snarky tone, "Wow, you're scanning everything so fast." And with no fucks left to give, I responded in the most deadpan tone, "I want to kill myself." Needless to say, they shut up really quickly and left the store in such a hurry. I'm not actually depressed or suicidal, nor do I know why I said what I did, but I had the assistant manager laughing for about 10 minutes. Did you go through high school watching Filthy Frank or iDubbbz? Because that's... You probably just unlocked a core response right there that was just waiting for the perfect opportunity to be said. If not, then I have no idea. Hell, sometimes I occasionally slip up and those those comments come out occasionally. I'll be streaming Minecraft and the mildest inconvenience happens and I'm just like, I want to hang myself. It's not good. Trust me, I know, but it's not. The 2010s were a different time for humor. Dramatic T. It's supposed to be dramatic, but it's spelled like dramatic. Doesn't matter. Some old ladies tried to lecture me about my tattoos, so I showed them my mother's and my husband's tattoos. Passive-aggressively murdered. My husband, my own mother, and I decided to visit my husband's family. They live in a small, remote European village. He would always tell me the villagers, especially old women, from his hometown are overly religious and nosy. I thought it would be okay since we'll be there for only a couple of hours and we don't plan on doing anything scandalous anyway. Fast forward to the visiting time. My mother-in-law invited a couple of her friends after we arrived, since they were all curious about her new bride. And oh my god, those ladies were insufferable. They stared at me at every opportunity, judging my dyed hair and my ear piercing with their grimaces. I ignored their stares. We were going to be here for a few hours and I thought it wasn't worth making a scene over a few women I might never see again in my life. But one of them saw my arm tattoo and said, "You shouldn't doodle on your body." Then they all started commenting about how I should be ashamed of myself for harming the body that God gave me and how unlucky of my mother-in-law for such a person to marry her son. Then I called my own mother and told her calmly that this woman was interested in my tattoo. What they didn't know was that my mother had the same tattoo. My mother proudly showed them her own tattoo and told them that the tattoo represented my late father and how much it meant to her that I got the same tattoo as her. Then I playfully asked my mother to show them her other tattoos, and she pulled up her sweater to reveal her other arm, covered in tattoos. Their faces were priceless. Then my husband joined us, and to add fuel to the fire, I asked him to show them his tattoo as well. When we got home, my mother asked me why I was behaving like that about the tattoos. When I told her what happened, she said, "If you had told me earlier, we would have made them believe your grandmother's birthmark was a tattoo too." Tattoos are probably something that I'll never get in my life because I just don't have an interest. But I do like them for the concept of the body art that they are. I think it's cool, man. You should be able to do whatever you want to your body that you want. Just understand that there could be consequences. I'm looking at the guy who made his ears be devil ears and pierced his tongue and cut it down the middle and dyed the whites of his eyes black and wonders why he can't get a job. But that is 100% his choice to make. I think that some body modification trends are pretty goofy, but at the same time, I do goofy things too. And it doesn't affect me, so why should I care what makes you happy? Not to mention the whole argument of defiling the body that God gave you does bring up a lot of questions when it comes to like LASIK eye surgery and just other general quality of life surgeries. Like if you replace your knee or your hip or even get an organ transplant, does that count? Because you're still like defiling the original blueprint that was made for you by your creator. I don't know. That kind of stuff doesn't quite click in my head for me because at the end of the day, when the body decomposes, all that's going to remain is just nothing but a skeleton. And then the hip replacement and knee replacement will be very obvious. Hygh. My mom thought she could train me to like cilantro. I proved her wrong. Malicious compliance. So when I was small, my mom had this weird obsession of, if you eat something enough, you'll like it eventually, and didn't believe me when I would gag on merely the smell of cilantro. Thought I was just acting. She would even say that she didn't like it when she was small, and the taste grew on her when she ate it enough. I remembered coming home from school and smelling the cilantro before entering the door, and know that I would be forced to sit through a cilantro hot pot night. One day, I don't know what came into her mind, and she decided to make what she called cilantro soup. The ingredients are as follow: water, cilantro, salt. That's all. I imagine this would sound awful even for someone who likes cilantro. She put a whole bowl of it in front of the TV and asked me to drink it, adding a bunch of health information she read about cilantro, trying to persuade me while I'm gagging to the smell of it. At last, she gave up and just ordered me to drink it. I take a sip and dry gag vigorously and visibly. My stomach is literally cramping, and I'm 0% acting. I told her I'm about to throw up and I cannot finish the soup. She told me to stop acting and just pinch my nose and down the whole thing if I didn't like it. I did so. I pinch my nose and take the whole bowl like a shot. Seconds after swallowing, I breathe in and let out a sigh of relief. And the strong smell of cilantro was brought up to my nose with a sigh. My stomach cramped immediately and I threw up all over the TV, and we both stood there, silently looking at the vomit painting masterpiece for seconds. She never asked me to eat anything with cilantro that day off, and will warn me about having cilantro in certain dishes. She'll even ask me if I could go to my room when her church friends want to come over for cilantro hot pot, and will cook separate meals for me for days like that. To this day, I still hate cilantro, but my body reacts less vigorously now, and I can swallow with a straight face if I accidentally eat some. Wow, he's blew up, thanks guys. I think rather than copy and paste similar answers, it would be better just to reply here. So, 1. Did your mom drink the soup? Yes, she had her bowl finished on the table when I have to drink mine. She's generally a good cook, but would go rather unhinged when she's trying to cook something for the purpose of health. I remember trying leek soup to cure a bad cold, and yeah, you guessed it right. The ingredients are leek, water, and salt. 2. Cilantro gene-related info. I sent it to her, but sadly she doesn't believe in science, lol. I'm not sure if I tasted as soap or just stinky bugs, but it surely doesn't smell floral to me, so I guess I have the gene? And 3. r/cilantro. I didn't know of this sub, lol. I joined a parody Facebook group for promoting illegalizing cilantro though. So I unfortunately have the cilantro gene, and it's one of those things in like a culinary experience that I am very envious of because everyone seems to love it, but I have tried so many times, but I can't. I just can't. Like I can still eat it and not gag, but whenever it's in a meal, I just get the it just overwhelms whatever I eat as just like a weird, soapy taste. But it's not like a soap taste either. Like it tastes floral. It tastes like almost a spice, like almost like a bastardized mint. It's so close to having like just a lot of potential, but there's just this nasty, soapy overtone to it that just seems to just overpower anything that it's in. And it's sad. I wish I didn't have that because I would love to be able to eat food and experience why other people love cilantro so much. But I also don't have a violent reaction to it. If I taste it in a dish, I'll still eat the dish. Noodle and squish. You want to know why I'm on light duties? Let me tell you in graphic detail. This one's marked as malicious compliance. Disclaimer, this story is about a medical procedure. First, finding the sub has made my dark little soul giddy. Second, this happened when I was in the military. I'll do my best to not use acronyms. Back in the summer of 2002, when I was a young corporal, I went to do a 4-month task for the leadership school. A pretty physical task with lots of field time. Just prior to going, I needed to have surgery to have an ovarian cyst removed. Not a huge deal. Day surgery. And laparoscopic, relatively non-invasive. But it is abdominal surgery, and I wouldn't be 100% for a few weeks. I'd worked for the same boss the summer before, and he was cool with me being 1, a few days late for the task start, and 2, taking advantage of my amazing logistic skills to help plan for the multiple support needs of multiple courses. With the background out of the way, let's get to the traumatizing. 2 days post-surgery, I report for duty with Bossman, and then head immediately to medical to get light duty sorted out. Done and done. I head into work, give the boss my restrictions, and get caught up with some of the guys I'd worked with the summer before. Obviously, they were curious as to why I was late to report, but we're cool with my "I had surgery 2 days ago" explanation. All but one. Enter Corporal Dump. Now, medical information doesn't need to be shared, obviously, just restrictions, and no one, other than the medical personnel, is even allowed to ask why restrictions are needed. Corporal Dump either doesn't know this or doesn't care, and this is the first time he's ever met yours truly. He's bitching that, "I just got here and I'm on chit." Medical restrictions. Already. And it's just bull. The reason I'm getting special treatment is because I'm a girl. Oh, you did not. My sergeant is giving me the "do you want to handle this or should I" look with an inquisitive head tilt. I sweetly ask Corporal Dump if he really wants to know why I'm on light duties. He replies in the affirmative or sarcastic, "Yeah, I could do." And I proceed to tell him. Well, first I had 3 small incisions, one in my belly button, one on the side of my abdomen, and one halfway between my belly button and mons. At this point, Corporal Dump is no longer curious and likely confused to what a mons is. But I insist. He have all the details. so that he can be assured that my medical limitations are warranted. Once the incisions were made, they then inserted a camera in one, a suction tool in another, and a laser in the other. He's now very pale and doing everything but sticking his fingers in his ears. Then, with the laser, they chopped up the grapefruit-sized cyst in my left ovary, sucked it out, and then stitched me up. That's why I'm on light duties. With the mumbled, slightly nauseated sorry, Corporal Dump made a hasty retreat and spent the next 4 months avoiding me whenever possible. Perhaps we applied the don't ask, don't tell rule to the wrong category of individual. Sounds like though it might already be in place and this was just described to get him to shut the hell up and teach him a bit of a lesson, which is, yeah, the right thing to do. Used wafer 6049. My grandpa's death stopped my worst work client in the middle of their rant. This story is from about 20 years now. I work in my family's company. At the time, my dad was still running the show day to day, and very involved in most of the big meetings we had. We were in the middle of a stressful and busy project with our very worst client, who had long ago burned up all goodwill with us from their shitty treatment of us. I used to say, by the time we're done with this project, everyone on our team will have earned a nickel an hour on it, from the significant extra work we did. I learned to charge more later. My dad's dad lived about an hour away from me / our office, and my uncle lived close by him, so he was supposed to take Grandpa to his doctor's appointment for something that morning. Uncle phoned the office early. He had gone over to Grandpa's house to pick him up and found that Grandpa had passed in his sleep. We said Grandpa hated going to the doctor so much he died instead of going. Our family has a bit of a dark sense of humor, as did Grandpa. My dad rushed out to meet his brother and help with the arrangements and the funeral home folks. Well, apparently, in the chaos of all of that, we'd forgotten that asshole client had a conference call with my dad set up for that morning. I answered their call and said dear old dad was out, and they just lost it, screaming and cussing up a storm. This is so unprofessional. He said he'd be here for our call. So, in my lowest growl possible, I shot back. Well, I mean, his dad died this morning and he's on the way to identify the body. I can probably have him call you from the coroner's office if you'd like. Ooh, the air was sucked out of the call, and they did their best to backtrack and apologize. They knew this was my dad they were calling for. Grandpa would have laughed his ass off to know that he was able to shut up our worst client, and we still tell this story today. So this is tangentially related, but I remember a quote from a professor, not one of mine, who said that if he quit his job, so many family members would definitely be alive for the holidays because the amount of family members that die before finals is astonishing. Hopefully I don't need to explain the joke for you, but sometimes, if not most of the time, usually it's someone faking the death of a family member to get out of some kind of obligation. It's fairly common. I've unfortunately done it when I was younger, and I'm sure some of you have as well. But even if it is a common excuse for the one time that it actually is the correct reason for why things are the way they are, you don't want to be the guy who questions it and the asshole because of it. Or else you'll end up like this poor guy who had the wind knocked out of his sails and had to backtrack rapidly and probably felt like a total asshole for, well, to this day, and probably still thinks about it. I had an encounter like this a while back and thankfully was able to navigate this to a point where I've learned that the best way to handle a situation where someone is late to something or a situation's occurred that was not planned, sometimes it's best to calmly ask for the reason why and figure out if some kind of unforeseen circumstance happened instead of blowing up at the person and being angry with them. When I worked in fast food, I had been abandoned on my shift and I was the one person working a 4-person job. We were already critically understaffed and it was supposed to be 2 people working a 4-person job, but still, I was 1 person working a 4-person job and I was really upset as to why my coworker was a no-show. I couldn't get someone to fill in for the schedule. I was pretty much in the middle of a Sunday rush, running that by myself and running ragged, and lo and behold, 2 hours after the rush, my coworker finally shows up, and thankfully, I saw their face before I got angry with them, and was, in that moment, smart enough to ask them what's going on before being upset with them for the fact that they were late. I found out they had to rush their pet ferret to the vet because it ate something it wasn't supposed to, and that's why they were late. The ferret survived, by the way. Shiny Moon. Sell our dogs to have children? Sir, I'm sterile. A while ago, my fiance, 32 male, and I, 26 female, Went to a birthday party of one of his cousins where I got to meet some of his not-so-close relatives. There was a moment where one of his uncles started some small talk with us. "You're regular. Oh, how long have you been together? What are your future plans?" Eventually, that conversation led to the topic of children. I do not want to have children, specifically on our current financial situation. We already have 4 dogs that he adopted before we got together, and our combined incomes are barely enough to cover our expenses. Also, due to medical reasons, I'm very low on weight and a pregnancy could easily get a lot of complications and risks. My fiancé is very supportive and on my side, and despite the fact that he'd like to have children, he's never tried to persuade or pressure me on wanting children. When his uncle asked, "So, when you having kids?" my fiancé jumped up front, knowing that the topic makes me uncomfortable, and politely answered that we're not planning on having children anytime soon. His uncle insisted. "Why not? Children are the joy of life." My fiancé responded in a playful way. "Children? In this economy? I don't think so," and started laughing. His uncle got pushy and went for, "When you have kids, you work to keep them afloat." My fiancé tried to keep polite and replied with, "We already have 4 dogs and they're little troublemakers, just like kids, and our salary already goes on kibble and rent." His uncle kept pushing and directly said, "Well, I mean, you can sell the dogs and have kids." Jesus Christ. My fiancé tried to keep a straight face, but couldn't hide his annoyance at such a comment. At that moment, I jumped in. I stared at his uncle directly to his eyes, and with a tiny smile, I said, "Sir, I'm sterile." His face dropped. He simply stuttered, "Oh, I'm sorry, I had no idea." But even then, I don't know why I gave him that accent, oh my god. But even then, he had the audacity to turn to my mother-in-law and ask her, "Is this true?" She was in the same table and witnessed the whole conversation. My mother-in-law simply answered, "I don't know. Ask her." He couldn't get himself up to try and ask me again, so he just awkwardly laughed and changed the topic. Sorry for the bad grammar, English is not my first language, but I wanted to share the story. Honestly, I feel the most bad for the mother-in-law for being dragged into that situation. That is not a good place to be in. Like, OP handled it brilliantly, don't get me wrong, and that's not a fun position to be in for OP or her husband. But the mother-in-law, that was unnecessary collateral damage. Good God, that poor woman. And she handled it well too. Let's just be clear. Directing the uncle back towards it is, I don't know, ask her. And that's not even covering the insulting portion of the uncle deferring to the mother-in-law to ask about her daughter-in-law's medical history, as if she would be a better authority on it. I don't know, something about that rubs me the extra wrong way, and that's not even talking about the dog comment. Like, I can't even imagine someone telling me like, "Hey, sell your pet so you can have a kid that you're not financially ready for." Rem 9612, your socks don't match. To start, I need to give some backstory. I, 27 female, had a life-changing accident at work 4 years ago, and am now handicapped. Due to my injury, I have to wear a compression sock because the circulation in my right leg is poor, and my foot swells up almost 3 times its size. I only have all black compression socks that go up to my knee, but I only wear it on my right leg, because I like fun socks on my other foot. I wear brightly colored ankle socks on my left foot, so it's obvious that I'm wearing mismatched socks. Well, about 2 years after my accident, I was at work talking with a nice coworker. We'll call her T, and she shared an office with another coworker. We'll call her K. K gives off mean girl vibes, like someone who would make an embarrassing observation loudly to make you uncomfortable, or talk about you behind your back but be super nice to your face. You know, that type of girl. Well, I was talking to T about work and K loudly goes, OP, your socks don't match," with a mean girl tone and a giggle. Now, I disassociated heavily about my leg. I know I need therapy, it's on the list. So the comment didn't really hurt me, but if I was someone else in that situation, it could have. So I decided to say something. With the most defeated look, I turned to her, took a deep, shaky breath, and said, "Oh, yeah, that's a medical device I wear to support my bum leg. I wish I could wear cool socks on both feet," and just ended by looking at the floor. She stuttered, but didn't say anything at first. But then she got up to leave the office and mumbled something about it being a joke and I'm too serious. Like, get bent, K. That comment could have brought me to tears if it was said too soon after my accident. I know this isn't as impressive as the other Traumatize Them Back stories, but it was a small victory for me being able to humble that mean girl, and hopefully she thinks twice about saying about someone else's appearance. Honestly, I prefer the more grounded Traumatize Them Back stories, because one of the reasons I don't cover this subreddit that often is because a lot of them are, well, if I'm gonna put it bluntly, either incredibly fake or heavily dramatized in hopes of them appearing in one of these videos, whether it's mine or another YouTuber's. Like, I've gone out of my way on this subreddit to try to read the ones that I believe at least could be true. There are ones that are posted here which are just blatantly false, and it's gotten to the point where people in the comments have complained about the fact that the no fake post rule isn't being enforced in the subreddit. Seems like that's been changing recently, which is really nice actually. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is because posts like this are the ones that I enjoy seeing. I feel bad because all the fake and crazy ones that get the most coverage overshadow the ones like these that actually have been grounded in reality. It almost creates a situation where people feel like they have to embellish on details in order for their post to get attention. And of course, I'm not saying every post is fake, obviously. I'm just saying that this subreddit has recently had a plague of fake posts being put on it, and it's made me not want to cover this as much as I used to. Because we're in a position now where posters who want to share their stories feel like they have to apologize because their trauma isn't as bad as others. Just Bubba Shrimp. They stopped asking for grandchildren real quick. My parents are the ex-super conservative Christian type. They've grown a lot and now they're pretty accepting, but still new to the idea of sexuality and non-nuclear relationships, and the idea that not everybody wants kids. I have 4 siblings, and they implicitly expect typical marriage and lots of grandkids. The whole kit and caboodle. You know how it is. Back around when I turned 18 or 19, somewhere around the age, when parents seem to start incessantly reminding you that you're an adult and that grandkids would be wonderful. I got the standard treatment of exactly that. Every few days the topic would pop up of, when are we getting grandkids? One day, my older sister and I were in the kitchen casually chatting with mom and dad when, as they seem to do, the topic of grandkids came up again. My sister at the time wasn't very out about the fact that she is very lesbian. And I wasn't really out about my preparations for transition and the fact that I was dating guys without them really knowing at the time. We brushed it off as usual, saying we don't really want kids, just cuz. But that day, for some reason, they kept pushing and insisting we consider marriage and kids. My sister was very clearly uncomfortable with the notion, insisting that she very adamantly did not want marriage at this point in her life. I was in a similar boat. My mother was asking why I wouldn't just consider it. I don't know why. I don't know if I was having a bad morning, if I was hungover or what. But I looked my mother dead in the eyes with my exasperated morning stare and said, "You're not getting grandkids because I have with men, mother." The room was very, very quiet, apart from a single cackling snort from my sister. My dad attempted a saving throw with, "Well, you just mean that you don't want to get married yet." I proceeded to divert my tired, blank stare and said perfectly, straight-faced, "No, it's just 'cause I dudes." I think at that point the conversation awkwardly turned somewhere entirely different, and I finished my breakfast and went out on errands or something. Nothing was spoken of that morning, and they have never pestered me or my sister about grandkids again. See, real talk, this is a conversation that I dreaded having with my parents when I was still trying to figure myself out, was the, they want grandkids, but how do I explain to them it's kind of a coin flip if I'm gonna be able to have biological kids or not? Kind of boat. But, that is where adopting comes in. Anxious Axolotl 4. My tattoo is in poor taste? Thanks for hating on my dead parents' memory. I, 24-year-old male, used to work at a hotel, mostly doing the overnights. Almost a year ago, we lost my stepdad, and we lost my grandma 2 months later. My family wasn't, and still aren't in the best shape. My mom, about a month after we lost my bonus dad, went to get a tattoo as a small memorial. I went with her, and since the artist was a friend of hers and had no more appointments, he took me as a walk-in to get something as well, my first tattoo. A few days after, I was at work one night and an elderly couple walked in. They were really nice until I went to hand them their room keys and my sleeve hitched up enough that the woman saw my tattoo peeking out. She scoffed and pointed at it saying, You really shouldn't have that in such a visible place. It's really poor taste that kids these days keep damaging their bodies just because they think it's cool. That's actually pretty trashy." Her husband looked over it, as though he was used to hearing her run her mouth, but I was at a breaking point. It had just been a month since losing my bonus dad at that point, and my grandma wasn't looking too good either. So I put on the biggest smile I could, my eyes already slightly misty with tears, which freaked them out further, and told her, "I'm sorry you think that, ma'am. However, you should know I got this just the other day because I lost my father last month to cancer, and it's not been easy." The woman looked mortified, and her face went bright red in embarrassment, and the husband started to apologize. He grabbed their keys and started pushing her towards the elevator, quietly telling her, "This is why we keep our opinions to ourselves," wife's name. For context, it isn't even a big tattoo or any image. It's just a little line on my wrist that says JK Livin', because that was my bonus dad's motto. Even when he faced challenges and obstacles, he would just keep living, and I intend to do the same. I hope my tears made her feel lower than shit. Memorial tattoos are always really sweet, and I'm happy that you have something like that to remember your... Honestly, calling them a bonus dad is a really sweet way of putting it. Honestly, there's very few tattoos that mean no Third Reichy, but at the same time, as long as it's within reason and not something just completely offensive, feel free to do what you want to your body. Like, it's your body, do what you want with it. I never understood the stigma behind it. Like, I'm aware there's a pretty storied history with tattoos on people of lower class, criminals, sailors, and whatnot, but at the same time, it's the modern era, and most people weren't alive during those days. Including boomers in these stories, I just don't get it. Perhaps it's just such a generational disconnect that has me isolated from it. I also do understand the religious aspect of it, but that seems to mostly be in older generations. I don't know, the conversation of tattoos never really comes up in my life because I don't personally have any tattoos, and it just isn't something I really have a conversation about with people and their dislike of tattoos. So I'd be interested to hear in the comments of what y'all have to think or say about it because it'd be cool for me to learn. Vivid Sir 755. How my grandpa got back at his school bully 20 years later. In an LA school, my grandpa was tormented by a school bully growing up. Let's call him Billy. Billy would always take my grandpa's lunch money and punk him. My grandpa never forgot Billy, or what he looked like. Later on, when my grandpa was in his early 30s, he saw Billy at a local burrito place in town after many years of never seeing him. My grandpa didn't go up to him. Billy never noticed my grandpa, but my grandpa saw him. Later that night, my grandpa was at a bar with his brother, and wouldn't you know it, Billy walked in. The place was packed, so my grandpa offered Billy a seat at his table. Billy had no idea who he was. He just thought he was a nice guy being friendly. They got to talking about their lives and what they do for a living, and my grandpa told Billy that he was a mind reader, and he's done shows in Vegas and all over. Billy thought it was cool, so my grandpa said, "Yeah, I'll read your mind for $20. I'll tell you what you did earlier today." Billy gave him the $20. My grandpa said, "Think of where you were earlier today." And after a few seconds, he said the name of a burrito place, and Billy was blown away. My grandpa then said, "For $20 more, I'll tell you what you ordered." The man paid, and of course, my grandpa got it right. Finally, my grandpa said, "For $40, I'll tell you what school you went to for elementary." Billy paid again, and my grandpa got it right. By the end of the night, my grandpa left with around $200, and Billy never knew a thing. And that's how my grandpa got back at his school bully, and Billy was none the wiser. I like the idea of Billy going around and telling a story of like, yeah, this guy knew where I went to elementary school, he knew all these things about me, he knew where I ate the burrito at, and it's just like, to everyone else, it's obvious, like, oh, this guy just conned you because he probably went to elementary school with you, you dumbass. But Billy in the moment was blown away by the mysticism of it, to the point where he was willing to spend $200, possibly in the 90s, which after inflation, that's a lot of money. My guess would also be that there was a little bit of the grandpa taking advantage of someone who was a bit intoxicated, because if they're at a bar having a good time, my guess would be the drinks were flowing. And Billy, at that point having less cognitive ability than your local NYC subway rat, probably fell right into the trap. Fryo night. Mother's boyfriend decided I was lying about not being able to eat certain foods. So firstly, greetings! This happened back when I was around 8 or 9 years old, back in a very small town, like 1,000 people small. My mother never really had a good taste in men, but at the time, the guy she was dating, whom I'll call Kev, seemed alright by me, a rare thing overall. And one evening, Kev decided to go out of his way on the way home from work, a 2-hour drive, to pick up some KFC. He had called and asked my mom what she and I wanted, and my mom told him anything is good, but just no coleslaw, as I can't eat it. I could hear him over the phone questioning her about it, but she didn't want to talk about it for the most part. And when he got home, he had gotten some coleslaw for himself. But everything seemed okay at the time. Now, for some context, I suffer from a food trauma with anything that has texture consistency with coleslaw or potato salad. It has nothing to do with the ingredients, just the texture. This stems back to when I lived with my half-siblings' dad and grandmother, as their grandma had a tendency to make one of those 2 dishes for every lunch and dinner for 2 years. And, the old, you're not leaving the table until you finish your plate. Now back to the main story. So about 3 days after he had brought home the KFC, my mom actually had to be out of town for most of the day for her one job at the time. So Kev had this wonderful idea. He went to Walmart, leaving me at home for about 2 hours. But I was used to that by that time. And he brought home 2 large tubs, those old rounded 128 fluid ounce ones. One of Neapolitan ice cream and the other coleslaw. When he got home, I did help him bring in the groceries, and then he sat me down at the table. Then he says, I know you're lying to your mom about not being able to eat coleslaw, so I'm going to do what my friend's dad did when my friend told him he couldn't eat peanut butter anymore. You're going to sit here until this tub is gone. I'll even help you finish it, and afterwards, we can have ice cream. I stared at him with this dumbfound look and said, this is going to make me sick, and he cuts me off, telling me to stop lying to him. At this point, I know I was not going to be getting out of this with my stomach contents intact. So, I quickly took 1 spoonful of coleslaw and shoveled it down. At this point, my body immediately starts to react in the form of dry heaving. And Kev now realized he may have actually f***ed up. He tells me I don't have to eat anymore. And I remember so clearly looking at him dead in the eyes as I forced another spoonful of coleslaw into my mouth. I, however, did not get to swallow, as everything came back up pretty much at that instance and right out onto the table, his lap, and the floor. I did, however, make sure not to puke into the coleslaw. At this point, Kev was now panicking, as A, I had just thrown up, B, the whole house now smelled of throw up, and C, he had a whole jug of coleslaw. He had me run to my bathroom before I could throw up anymore. Afterwards told me I can have as much ice cream as I wanted and asked me not to tell my mom about this, and then left me to my own devices for the evening. And I honestly had no plans of telling my mom. Oh no, I know full well my mom was going to fit the pieces together the moment she got home, as my mom knows I have an iron stomach, and there was only a handful of things that can make me throw up. So my mom got home late that night, and me and Kev were sitting in the living room as I watched him play Resident Evil 2, and I realized it was probably a bad idea back then due to my recent PTSD issues I was having at the time for unrelated issues. And while Kev did manage to clean up the mess and used way too much air freshener, there's not much you can do to fully get rid of that bile smell. She asked pretty much right off the bat why the house smelled like vomit, and Kev straight up told her that I threw up. She immediately started asking me if I was sick. I told her no, and simply pointed at the fridge. You see, at the time we were struggling a bit, and throwing away food was a no-go, but my mom wasn't normally the one to cook, and thus was rarely in the fridge. I did tell Kev I wasn't going to tell her about it, after all. And my mom quickly pieced together what had happened after seeing the huge tub of coleslaw in the fridge, and oh boy, did Kev get f***ing torn into, as not only did he do this behind her back, but my mom took this as a personal attack against her honesty. I have kind of a similar story to this, so back when I was like 6 or 7, My parents were throwing me into summer camp when I was younger and, the usual kind of stuff. And, well, there was a summer camp, I don't really know what to call him, like a teacher or like a caretaker or whatever, and she just fucking hated me. In retrospect, she probably hated my mom, which meant she hated me. And like, she was on my ass about everything. She did not like me. And it's not like I was a bad kid or anything, she just didn't fucking like me. Because all the other caretakers and instructor types didn't have a single problem with me. So that's why I'm pretty sure she didn't like my mom and the anger was put out towards me. But anyways, one time during like a little field trip / excursion, they brought tuna sandwiches. Now me, I don't like tuna. Don't know why, just don't. Like, it was a visceral reaction to how much I do not like tuna. Nowadays, I can eat tuna if it's in front of me, but I'm not a fan of it. I won't go out of my way to make anything tuna related. It's just not in my cup of tea. And I've tried. Now roll back to 6-year-old, 7-year-old me who was not quite acclimated to food yet and still had massive problems with food touching each other, was now having a tuna fish sandwich. Now granted, most of the meals that they would pack at the little summer camp thingy were great. I would scarf those down and get right back to the playground or whatever the hell we were doing at the time. But on that specific day, it was tuna, and I just sat there, took one bite, didn't like it, and stared at it. And my buddy, who also didn't like tuna, had the bright idea to actually go and ask the teacher that he could have something else to eat. And sure enough, they had a couple of ham and cheese sandwiches packed for this exact instance. I saw that he was able to get away with the tuna fish sandwich and actually have a regular food that was compatible with his stomach, and I thought, oh, I can do that too. So I walk up, ask the same question, and she says, no, you're just lying because you want to have a ham and cheese sandwich. Go finish your tuna. And I remember sitting there for nearly an hour staring at that sandwich because I did not want it, as all of my other friends were able to go run around and play and do whatever the hell they wanted while I was stuck just staring there because I couldn't just throw the sandwich away. I had to finish it. So I was just sitting in the grass staring at that stupid sandwich while she was fuming at me. And all I could think was like, why would I fake not liking tuna if I could just eat this sandwich and go and play at the park, huh? There is Gushers on the line. Why would I lie about this? This was nearly 20 years ago and it still holds a place in my brain for pure spite. Don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code ODDS at checkout. It's basically a caffeine powder that you put in your water, and I actually really like it. I use this on a daily basis. Don't forget that every purchase you make using code ODDS directly supports the channel. And if you want a personal recommendation from me, I would either recommend the Soda Pressing Pear or Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are currently my favorite flavors. And as a note, once we sell a certain amount of stuff, I get my own flavor and my own cup, and you all know I'm gonna choose some degenerate shit that's gonna make their PR team squirm. My goal is to make them regret partnering with me. So please, use code ODDS at checkout to make my dream come true of making a PR team squirm.